Okay, so we just read the Grimm's brothers story, The Donkey. You want to give a summary before we talk about it?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, anyways, yeah, there's a king and queen, and they haven't been able to have a child. So one day the queen says she's as barren as a field and is lamenting the situation. So God decides to give her a child, and she gives birth, but it's not a regular human child. It's a little donkey that comes out of her. Um, so upon seeing it, uh, yeah, she's of course disturbed, and she tells her husband, the king, that they need to get rid of it. But the king uh, disagrees with her and tells her that the child is a blessing and that they won't get rid of the child. So they decide to keep it. And
Yeah, she had said she'd far rather have no child than to have a donkey.
mm, yeah, so the little prince grows up, and uh, one day he has like a lute master, or yeah, he's trying, or he hears the lute and tells the lute master that he really wants to learn the instrument, but the master tells him that his fingers are too big, and it's kind of discouraging him because he doesn't think a donkey could play the lute. But the prince is determined, and he still like insists, and he learns to play the lute, and he becomes like very good at it. Like I think almost I don't know if a master himself, but like very high level.
It says, yeah,
Um,
as good as a master.
yeah. So yeah, he plays the lute, and then one day he's I think walking with a servant. I'm not so sure, but he's walking, and they come across a lake with water as clear as a mirror. And when he looks at the his reflection on there, he sees for the first time that he's a donkey because he'd never been able to see himself before, and he becomes uh, distraught over it and decides to run away with the servant. Um,
Yeah, the one faithful companion.
mhm. So he runs away, and then sometime during that journey he comes into another kingdom, and he I don't remember if they're like in need of food and stuff, or yeah, they need help. So he calls out like at the entrance to the kingdom, and says that he's able to play the lute. Uh, I think in exchange for help or food. I'm not so sure. Um, but so then like a servant on the other side uh tells the king that there's, I think they notice it's a donkey, right?
Well, yes, and they had heard
Yeah.
him playing the lute so
Yeah.
beautifully. So that's what brought the servant to the door in the first place. At first, they did not answer the door.
Yeah. So didn't answer. And then they go tell the king that they're asking to be let in. So the king hears it, and he says he gives his approval for them to be let inside. And then when they come inside, like the whole court and stuff sees that it's a donkey. So they're kind of, I think, laughing at him. Uh, but then the donkey insists that he's not like a common stable donkey. He's
Well,
like a
they had
noble
said
donkey.
you can go
Uh,
ahead and sit with the servants. And then
mhm.
he said that I'm
Yeah.
not a common donkey, not a common
Yeah.
ass,
So yeah,
but I'm a noble ass.
so yeah, they so eventually I think they kind of say okay, that he can sit with the nobles, but then he insists that he actually wants to be next to the king.
Well, they'd said,
Uh,
okay, you can sit with the soldiers, the men of war.
mhm,
But then he insisted sitting with the king, and the king smiled and said good-naturedly, "Okay, yes, little ass, you could come sit here next to me."
mhm. So yeah, the king allows it, and um, he actually has him also seated next to his daughter, the princess, and
Who is like the most beautiful one in the whole area.
mhm. And yeah, they find that he's very well behaved and knowledgeable of etiquette and stuff. So he does well during the feast.
That's right. Yeah, he eats most daintily.
Hmm. So yeah, he stays and plays the lute, and the king becomes very fond of him. Um, but then, like, I think one day he kind of gets melancholic about like maybe his welcome running out. Uh, so he goes to the king and asks him if to be dismissed, and the king offers him um, gold, fine jewelry or clothing,
Yeah,
or
he asked
even
him,
like
"What do you
half his
want, like to
kingdom.
stay?"
Yeah, to stay. And he wants none of that stuff. But then the king finally asks him if he'd like his daughter to be his wife. And he says, yes, that's what he would like. And his demeanor becomes very happy again. So the marriage day comes, and yeah, they get married. And the king is curious to see if anything will happen or if he will still treat the princess well on their wedding night. So he sends a servant to go hide in her room. And so yeah, the donkey is there with the princess, and the donkey he actually reveals himself to be a regular handsome prince, like when he because he immediately he locks the door and takes his skin off. Um, so the princess is very happy, and yeah, the night goes fine. And then the next day, the king asked the princess if she was okay with having married a donkey. And the princess says that she's very happy and it couldn't have gone better for her. And the servant that had been hiding in the room, he goes to tell the king the truth of what he saw, that the donkey was really a human prince and it was the skin he was wearing all along. So the king wants to see this for himself, and he waits for the on the second day for the prince to fall asleep, and he has the servant steal the skin while he's asleep,
Wait, no,
I
no, no.
think.
The king himself goes to the room. Isn't it the
Yeah.
king himself?
Oh, okay. So that happens, and they take the skin, and the servant burns it. So when the prince wakes up, he's panicking about his skin being lost, and he thinks that he'll have no choice now but to escape. Um, so I think he goes to escape, but the king is there and tells him that he doesn't want him to leave, um, and that yeah, he'll have half his kingdom and then the rest of it when he passes away. Um, so the prince stays, and within a year, the king passes away, so he gets the whole kingdom, and then he inherits the other kingdom from his father. So he gets two kingdoms and lives magnificently, according to the story.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good memory. It said he lived in all magnificence at the end. Yeah, I kind of thought like things would go badly or something at the end. Uh, so I was kind of surprised everything turned out well.
Mhm.
I don't quite understand this story. I mean, when you think about the beginning, like, so his mom had basically prayed for a son, and then when she's given a son, but not quite what she wanted, him being in donkey form. She curses him and says, she would have rather had no son at all than have this son, and she wants to throw him in the river or something like that. And so there's this, she's made a deal in a way with praying, but then when she gets something, she's not happy with it and she wants to get rid of it. So there's this ingratitude, but then there's this gratitude of the king who says, he'll sit on the throne and wear the royal crown and everything. He's a gift from God. So there's this kind of those things. And then, yeah, he is a gift from God. And he does, it mentions how he has such a cheery disposition and he's a quick study and he's very skillful. He's also skillful with like courtly things like playing the lute or um, with his table manners. He's clean. He's obviously has immense people skills, because the king, he's able to like as a donkey to like stand in front of all these people in the court and talk directly to the king and say like my worth is I will sit next to you. And then later on the king loves him and wants him to stick around. I mean, he's obviously got immense like people skills. And the girl herself also like doesn't seem to mind marrying him either. So, yeah, it's interesting that there's waiting in this story. So like when he had seen his donkey's form, he had sent him on his crisis, and then he gone out and traveled around, and then he goes to this castle that has like the most beautiful daughter in the land, and then he's waiting, and then he plays his lute, and then later when he has been at the castle for a while, he's kind of ready to go, like nothing's happening. So I guess the idea is that he's kind of like, I don't know what kind of Prince Charming or something would be the right analogy, but like he's kind of like waiting patiently his with display of his very high talent, you know, like when he was waiting outside the castle, he was displaying his lute skills, and then when he's in the castle he's displaying apparently his people skills and just his repartee, his cheery disposition or whatever, his by force of his character, like people don't want him to go but he's kind of ready to go because I guess nothing's happening. Yeah, what are your thoughts about this story? Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of there's his mother wanted to throw him in the river, and then later the king throws his donkey form in the fire and has to burn it completely, which is reminiscent of the hedgehog story by the Grimm's brothers. You have to burn that identity completely, or he can't, or he could return to it. Why does he? It does seem out of the blue that he suddenly, we're told that this the donkey form is just a suit, but it seems like he has to wear it or someone else has to take it off him or something like that. I mean, like why can't he just take off his donkey suit and just be a normal person? But maybe it has to do something with love. Maybe it's like Beauty and the Beast. Like maybe presumably he's only able to take it, only show his true form, only be vulnerable with the king's daughter who loves him after he's been accepted by the king enough to marry the king's daughter. Because maybe he's kind of, yeah, he's got this, he like uses the suit, which is the reason people, at least his mother, considered him vile. And his mother doesn't appear again in the story, but his father does, in that he inherits the kingdom later on, at least in that way. But yeah, maybe he uses the donkey suit as kind of a, like his strength. You know, it's kind of like, I don't know what other story this is like, but he uses his, the thing that is his supposed weakness becomes his strength or something, you know. But then at some point, it's time to slough that off because he's made it and he doesn't need that crutch anymore. But yeah, what do you think about this?
Mm. I was thinking of it more as like a protection of sorts, that thing from like that donkey suit from like people that wouldn't have liked him, uh, that only liked him conditionally, would have liked only if he was like a regular looking person. Um,
Because he was a king or something? I mean, a king's son.
no, because like yeah, or because they or more like they didn't like him because he was a donkey. So like I thought maybe that suit he was using as kind of protection to kind of dissuade those people, I guess, from kind of uh being in his life in a way. But
Yeah, that goes along with the idea I talked to you about where so problem with being a king's son is that, I
mm,
mean, one problem is that you don't know how people really are towards you because
mm,
they're treating you as a prince, but
mm,
or they're probably treating you as a prince, but if you have this donkey suit, I mean, if you look like a donkey, then they're not going to treat you that well anyway. So this is a way,
mm,
this is like, I don't know if it's a handicap or something. This is a
mm,
way of, or like a reverse handicap or something. This
mm,
is a way of trying to
mm,
even things up to where you'll see people's true sides and not just the
mm,
sycophantic side.
mm,
But you're saying something like, yeah, this is, you're basically saying something like, yeah, this is keeping people at some distance so that they're not being sycophantic towards him, they're being
mm,
genuine towards him.
mm. Yeah, but
But
still
then
though,
he's
like
afraid to get rid of that psychological defense because now people may be superficial towards him
mhm.
and he doesn't
um
want that.
yeah, but then like with the marriage and inheriting kingdoms, he's becoming like an adult with adult responsibilities as like a man too. So there isn't really like a place in his life now to like be hiding and perhaps kind of like a child in a way.
Yeah, that
With
makes sense.
that little that would cut running around with that donkey skin.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, he was hiding. Yeah, he was. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I did not think you know, that just, I'm still a little bit, I'm impressed by how sudden the knowledge of that donkey suit
Yeah.
just being a suit. Was it always just a suit? I mean, was he, but yeah, again, this story reminds you of the hedgehog story where it's like he's born a hedgehog, but then it later becomes a suit. But I think in that other story, there's more of a reason. There's more of some kind of logic given to how it's just a suit or something at some point. But in this one, it seems like he's a donkey, and then oh, all of a sudden it's a donkey suit. But maybe you can talk about like him going out into the world and experiencing things and experiencing court being a process of maturation and therefore transformation, where maybe he has learned that it is not a it is not who he really is. It is just his appearance. Maybe this is about appearances, is about like, let's say you're like really physically ugly, but you have a really beautiful soul, and people treat you based on the ugliness, but then you have a cheery disposition, you are willing to learn a lot, and then so you kind of are able to act in the world as if you did not look that way at all, you know. But later on, but later on, yeah, you have to kind of get rid of all those considerations and just you've now gotten position in the world because of who you really are, and now you have to act based on that position or something. But yeah, yeah. Oh, and another thing I thought about this story is that it does seem to be about the court. Like he goes to this new castle with this king, and yeah, there's the different levels, like the servants and the soldiers, and then the royalty. And he presumably is around these people for a long time and kind of learning maybe their games or learning like things about how to get along there. And he kind of wants to leave after that. So, and also after his donkey suit is burned completely, he also wants to leave then. So maybe it's this has something to do with like the good leader who is kind of reluctant to take on that responsibility because he doesn't really love the power itself. He just and that's why he's a good leader, you know, but different from say the power hungry kind of person, the conqueror. Yeah. But yeah, he's a very likable character, kind of like Hedgehog Boy. It's very yeah, like you're rooting for him. Sort of like the lovable loser or something, but he's not a loser, but he's just a very lovable person who ends up, yeah, just we see his true form at the end. But any other thoughts about this?
So far.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, a little bit surprised by the story, but genuinely liked it. But I wonder if there's some depths that we're missing there, but maybe we'll uncover those later. Okay. Well, thanks for reading this story with us, and talk to you soon.
Okay.